Hi, my name is Jeff Rascov, and today I will be talking about Photoshop. And so I have several lessons about Photoshop to show you and demonstrate. And hold on, let me close this. So again, today I will mostly be talking about Photoshop. The version I have right here is 21.1, well maybe, I don't know, it says update. But it's around Photoshop 20. And it just depends on your version, but most of the things I demonstrate today you could use on pretty much any version of Photoshop, so keep that in mind. Let's look at the files that you can download off my website to practice with. So I do have a folder called Rascov Photoshop class, Photoshop class Rascov, that's what it's called. And inside there you can see different aspects of what I am going to demonstrate. There's 8 different lessons, and if you go to the start here, you'll see it kind of talks a little bit about who I am, and I've been using Photoshop for over 20 years. And so I talk a little bit about what Photoshop is, and in this handout, and what is a pixel. Most of the stuff inside Photoshop is made of little tiny dots called pixels, also referred to as a bitmap or raster file. And then other types of graphics you can make would be something that you would make in Adobe Illustrator, which would be a vector graphics. So there's a little handout. Again, I have several lessons that we'll talk about today. I will split the videos up into smaller videos so that they're not so long. In addition, all the images that I will show today are my images and not stolen from the internet. So again, the first lesson will be learning about Photoshop and the interface, how to open a file, color correcting, and mostly what I do in Photoshop is I do a lot of color correcting. And so if you look at the website I have linked here, if I click on that and we go to the website here, you see most of the things I do in Photoshop or for graphics for videos, or in this case photos for products. I do product photography, so I take pictures of products in Photoshop like you see here. I put a arrow on here, and of course color correcting and so on. I take some mostly photos of the products and then people demonstrating the products. If you look inside any of the products, you will see we have pictures of people using products like this. So I do a lot of Photoshop or photographs like that. Oh look, there's a photo right there. There's an piece of art I made in Photoshop right there. So again, I do a lot of Photoshop. I also do images for videos in Photoshop, like this thumbnail you see here. This is a YouTube. This is this text is put in Photoshop and so on. So again, I use Photoshop for many different things. So I'm going to show you and demonstrate today all kinds of different things you can do in Photoshop, and hopefully this helps you out in your career. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about the handouts. A lot of the things I demonstrate are actually written handouts on how to do these things. So if you look at them in the handouts folder, you'll see there is written handouts of how to do many of the things I'm going to demonstrate today. So if you open up the first one, lesson 1, mostly what I do is I do color correcting of photos. Okay, and so let's get started right away. So the first thing I'm going to do is how to open Photoshop. I'm on a Mac right now, and there is a dock down here, and it has Photoshop 2020 in it. But of course, you could have other applications that you could use. I don't know why it's asking me this. I guess I could just minimize it. Okay, so again, I'm going to open up Photoshop. You can find a way to open it on your computer, I hope. And so if you just click on, again, I'm using Photoshop 2020. And inside the program, I'm going to reset it to the default. So to reset it to default, if you go underneath Windows, Workspace, Reset Essentials. So Essentials is the default interface. So when we talk about the interface, we're talking about all the different graphics and all the windows and things. And if we go to Windows Workspace right here, these are the menu items at the top up here. Again, Photoshop is the first one over here on the left, but under Windows right up here, if you go under Windows Workspace, you can say Reset Essentials is what I'm going to do, so all my windows kind of go back to default. So this is kind of the way that Photoshop kind of looks if you first open it for the first time after you have installed it from Adobe. And so I had to do that because I was using Photoshop for many different things lately, so I had to do that. In fact, let's first open up some files. So there's 2 flower files in the lesson 1 folder. So if you go underneath file open right here and you go to the lesson 1 folder under so again, you can download the files called Photoshop class Rascov. And in the lesson 1 folder, if I open that up, you'll see there's a variety of different files that you could use. I can open up flower 1 and flower 2, both of them. I'm going to hold the shift key down. So again, the open is under file, open. You get a window. You need to find the folder that I have given you. Under here is lesson 1. And I have 2 flowers, one called flower 1 and flower 2. And I held the shift key down to select both of them. Again, the shift key we'll use to select both of them. And then I'm going to hit open. They're both JPEG files, and I'll talk a little bit about file formats later on, but they're both JPEG files. And if I hit open, it'll open them up inside of Photoshop. Now, if you have more than one file open inside of Photoshop, you'll notice there's a tab at the top where you can jump back and forth between them. So again, if you look up here, you can see I have 2 files that are open, and again, I can jump back and forth between them. Next thing I want you to see up there in the upper left corner is the magnification option. What is that? That's the way you're viewing it inside of Photoshop. If you look here and see how it says 33% up there, 33%. That just means that the file is actually zoomed out. If you zoom in at 100%, then the pixels in the image are kind of matching the pixels in the screen. So again, I'm going to go to this first one, flower 1, by clicking on it. Again, you can click up here. Left click is what I'm doing. And if I zoom in under hit Command plus, you'll see it zooms in. I'm hitting Command. If you're on Windows, it's Control plus. And if you don't like using command keys to zoom in, there is a zoom option over here, a tool, and it's kind of down below. If you get all the way down to this bar at the bottom, this is the toolbar here, and I know I haven't talked about it yet, but if you go all the way down to the very bottom, you'll see there is a zoom feature right there. Allows you to click to zoom in, click to zoom in. Again, but I use the command keys or the control keys on the keyboard. If you're on Windows, if you hit Control minus, it'll zoom out. Or if you're on Mac, you hit Command minus and zooms out. And then zoom in, Command plus. Or you can use the tool here. The advantage of the command key is, of course, you could use other tools at the same time that you're zooming. So in this image, again, if you look at it at 100% right here, so again, the zoom factor is up here where the file name is in the upper corner here. If you look at it when it says 100% right there, that is usually the size it will be when you post it like on a website or something like that. That means the pixels in the image are kind of matching the pixels in the screen. And of course, this would be way too big for a website right now, because if you look at it, you'll see that, I can't even make the window bigger here. I'm going to have to close some of these things here. Let me close this group here. There we go. And I'll talk about these menus in a minute. Over there, please excuse me there. In this case, if you zoom in and you keep zooming in, we could see the pixels. So I'm going to hit Command plus again, 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 and keep hitting it until I go all the way in. What is this? Well, if you zoom in, and right now if you look up here, I'm at 12,800%. I am looking at the individual dots or pixels that are inside of an image. Again, this is called a raster image or bitmap image. And it is an image that is made up of tiny squares. Each one of these squares is a mathematical equation. And that mathematical equation is basically a value of red, green, and blue. And so each one of these, again, if you click on the little squares over here in the bottom of the toolbar, these are the swatches, what's called color swatches. And if you click on one of those, double click on one of those, you can see this is the color picker in the program. And I'm not going to choose a different color, I'm just showing you this. And that, you see there's red, green, and blue options here inside the color picker. So each pixel that you see here is a combination. See if I'm going to click around the pixels here for a moment. Each one of them is a combination of different red, green, and blue. Or in this case, a 24-bit image, which is 16 million colors. So each one of these pixels is one out of 16 million different combinations. And so if you look here, we got red, green, and blue, and so I'm just going to hit OK for this for right now. I'm not going to change anything. I just wanted to show you the pixels. To zoom out again is Command minus. Now when you're zoomed in and zoom out and you're working on pixels and you're zoomed in and you're trying to do something, if you want to kind of scroll the window around, what scroll means is that you can move the window around. If you hold the space bar down, it gives you a hand, and then you can move the window around. So I do that a lot when I'm working in the program, where I'm hitting Command minus to zoom out, I'm hitting space bar to move the window around, because I'm often zooming in and zooming out and scrolling around a lot. So let's talk about color correcting for a moment, now that we talked about basics of pixels and things like that. A lot of times when you're looking at an image inside of Photoshop, or you take a picture with your camera, the camera doesn't take everything at the same kind of intensity. As you notice back here, it's kind of dark, and it's really hot over here. What I mean by hot is that there was a lot of sun on these flowers in this area right here, and it was a little bit overexposed right there. So a lot of the things that I do in Photoshop is correcting of color balance as well as exposure. And probably the first thing we're going to talk about is how I do that mostly. And again, if you look at the handout, I'm going to get back to the handout for a moment. Again, this is sort of following what the handout talks about. Again, I talked about scrolling in and out. You can see the pixels right there. You can see the image. And the one I'm going to adjust is using menu adjustments. Okay, adjustments are the ones, that's these ones right here, that are used to adjust your picture. And so these are the ones I'm going to talk about. Again, it's under menu adjustments. So if I go back to Photoshop for a moment, I'm going to go underneath image adjustments, and again you see there's a whole bunch of options here. The number one that I use probably mostly is called curves. Curves is a way, and it's been in Photoshop probably since almost the beginning. Curves is a way that you adjust the actual value, the lightness, darkness of the area. So if you wanted to bring the dark areas in the background there up a little bit so that they're a little brighter, you could use levels right here. So let's look at the levels. I use levels pretty much on every photo. What you're looking at in levels is you'll see that this thing's called a histogram, this bar that you see right here. In this bar, there's black on the bottom. That's the triangle in the middle here on the bottom. Middle gray is the middle one, and then white is the one at the top up here. And I use this on probably every photo. So again, if I wanted to bring see back here is very dark back here. If I wanted to bring that out, I would take the middle gray one and move it towards the left. You'll notice the background starts to, there's more coming out in here. And again, if you hit the preview button, there's a little checkbox right here. You say before, after, before, after, before, after. Which really good. You see that really helped the background a little bit, but we've lost some of the light. Again, I might make some parts a little darker by taking the actual black, the little arrow right here, and going to the right a little bit. And maybe move this a little bit more. Maybe this one on the very end is a white one. If I move that down, you'll see, oosh, I start losing a lot of stuff over here. And again, that hot area there gets blown out, and blown out means it's overexposed. So the white one, I'm really not going to mess with very much. I'm just going to move it a little bit. So again, very useful to do. You can see a before and after. As you're working in the program, there's a lot of preview options before and after, before and after. So if you hit OK, you'll see that we have a nice, at least start to color correcting this image. Next, if the one I want to show you would be actual color correcting, or let me see if I'm going to try and follow the handout here. So again, levels, what I just talked about. Oh, I was actually using a different flower, the other flower right there. But you get the idea. Let me finish with this one before we get to the other flower. The other one I'd probably do in here might bring some more color out. I mean, there's a lot of color in here, but I might want to even bring more color out. To do that might be under Image Adjustment, and the one is called Hue and Saturation. What saturation is kind of the amount of color. So if I turn the saturation up, you'll see, I'm going to exaggerate this. You see, whoosh, look at all that color, too much color. But it's a good way to sort of make the reds a little bit more redder. And if you hit preview, you'd see the flowers are much more colorful, just giving it a little bit of saturation. That's a little exaggeration there. And of course, hue means color as well, and you can adjust the actual hue, which changes the actual colors of the image. You can see you can even change the colors of the flowers there. Okay, so that's a way of adjusting color under hue and saturation. Next, let's talk about fixing some of the hot spots. So again, this was a little hot over here, and I'm going to use a kind of a photo tool now. Now I know I haven't talked about the toolbars over here. We just jumped right into color correcting, which I do pretty much all of it there. But over here, there's a bunch of tools inside of Photoshop that do things. And one of the tools is the dodge and burn tool. And these come from old photography terms where you would actually use light to actually expose your paper there. And the one is burn right here. What burns means is I'm going to kind of add more light here, which would then darken the print. That's why it's called burn. If it's all the way kind of down towards the bottom of the middle bottom, and it kind of looks like a magnifying glass, but it's not. It's called the dodge and burn. And if you hold the mouse down, you'll see there's one called dodge, burn, and sponge tool. And they all work by using a brush. And so if I go burn is the one I want to use, so it's called burn. It looks like a little hand right there. If we go to burn, and yours is going to be really tiny on yours. Mine's really big because I was using a big one before. What is this? Well, I haven't even clicked on the screen yet. It uses a brush to do the effect. And I know we haven't talked about brushes yet, but brushes are size of things or size of the effect that you're trying to do. And if you go all the way to the very top up here, whenever you choose a tool, it's going to have some options that you can use to adjust that tool. And if you look right here, not the first one here, again, not this one right here, but the one next to it has a number. Mine says 1040, yours probably says 30 or something like that. If you click on that, you can actually change the size. So I click on the arrow that points down, and there's a size option here. I'm going to actually go to about 330 or something like that, about something like that size. And if I put my cursor out, you could actually see there's like a little circle that you can see moving around the screen. That little circle is actually kind of the size of the effect will take place. So I'm going to go down to about 332, something like that, and I'm going to come over to where these flowers are. I'm going to kind of click on top, and you'll notice that it kind of darkens them up a little bit, and that helps a little bit. Again, you also have a range of highlights and shadows right here. So if I go to midtones is what I should have chose. So let me undo that. I really didn't want to do that because it kind of got rid of the white. So I'm going to actually undo that. Undo, burn. Undo is under edit, undo, edit, undo. Okay, so I went back and undid that. I'm actually going to change the option before I choose this tool to, instead of highlights, I'm going to choose midtones. And that'll be a little bit better. Yeah, it doesn't take the white, because the first time I did this, it was kind of taking just the white area and making it gray. Maybe then I will do highlights for the brick here. There we go, it's a little better. Okay, and so it's just darkening, it darkens up a little bit. I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit, but that sort of works a little bit better. And the other tool that's inside that same area is called the dodge tool. That lightens an area that might need to be lightened a little bit. So if I use that one again, there is a size at the top up there. I'm going to shrink that down just a little bit here to like 400. If you notice, I'm going to brighten these pink flowers over here. I'm going to choose the other tool that's inside there called the dodge tool again. There's a size. I'm going to use midtones as my example. And I'm going to come over here and brighten. Look at this. I'm going to brighten the flowers up there. There we go. We're making them a lot brighter over there. A lot brighter. And maybe even the ones over here. Yeah, brighten them up. So again, this photo probably looks a little bit better than it did when we first opened it, just by using the levels. I used hue and saturation, and then I used two tools, one of them called the dodge tool and the other one called the burn tool. So next, I'm going to pause this video, and we will then go and choose the other flower option. Okay, next I'm going to jump back to the other flower that I was using before. If you remember, I had a flower 1 and a flower 2 at the top up here. Remember the tabs in my last video I was using. So again, let's go to the flower 2. And in this one, again, I'm going to use some of the color correcting tools that I was using before. If we want to look at the handout again, let's look at some of the features that we will be doing. Again, this one that we will be using will be... Again, I will use levels on this, as well as hue and saturation, and maybe highlight, shadow and highlights. So again, let's go back to Photoshop here, and inside there, again, I'm going to go under image mode. I pretty much, not mode, image adjustment, levels right there. And then in levels, again, the middle here is the histogram, and you got a white on this side, middle gray, and black here. So There's not much to do in levels here. I think I might just open it up a little bit, add some more dark, and maybe open the white up a little bit so it's a little brighter. So again, just by adjusting these triangles, you can see it's a little bit brighter. Next, I'm going to go and use the hue and saturation, and we want to make this flower a little bit more colorful. So again, we can do that as well as adjust the color. I want to make it a little bit redder. So again, look at that. You can really adjust the color of something by using the hue here. And so you can see before color, after color, before color, after color. So again, I added more saturation and changed the hue a little bit to add a little bit more. And there you go. It's definitely a little bit different and better photo right there. And then the last one is one called shadow and highlights. And one of the problems with this image right now, and I'm going to choose again, image, adjustment, shadow and highlights, is that the background here is very bright and distracting. So we can do something called change the highlight. So how this tool works is you have a shadow option, which is usually has the first triangle kind of up. What that's doing is it's taking and making the shadow areas a little bit brighter. You can see you can make them brighter. See, I'm exaggerating a little bit there. Make the shadow so there's more color coming up here. And then the highlights is the same. If I turn the highlights down like this, look at how the background, but of course it messes with the flower as well. But you can see how the glass that's in the background is less bright by adjusting the highlights up. So by adjusting the shadow and highlights in this image right here, you could really get the background is not as dominant, and you can see the effect right there. So I'm really exaggerating this, but these are the ones I use a lot on everything that I photograph. I just don't use them as exaggerated as you see here. And if I hit OK, the image will then be a lot better. Okay, so those are the ones I would use here on these images, at least to starting point. The last part of this lesson is maybe changing things to grayscale or black and white. Like this image that we were working on before, I'm going to go back to the first image. It's a very nice image, but what if it was in black and white? And what I mean by black and white is we've probably seen black and white photographs before, so we could convert this into a black and white photograph, and it might even be better in a black and white photograph. So to do that, I can go under Image Adjustments, and there is one that's called Black and White right there. And if I click on that, it would actually just get rid of all the color information, but it will give you some options to adjust. It has a red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta to use to adjust it. And depending upon adjusting the dials will depend upon if you want to make things brighter or darker. Like these are really red down here, these flowers. So if I turn the red up a little bit, you'll see that they get a little bit brighter, or you can make them a little darker. So you can see that right away because they were kind of reddish down there. Same with yellow. We had some yellow flowers. Do we want to adjust those yellow flowers and the yellow? Greens, there's a lot of greens because the green is in the background there, and you can see you can adjust that as well, and so on. Same with magenta and blue. So you can do some basic adjustments. You can see that this is actually quite a nice image in black and white. And by using this image, you can then see how to do that. That's one way of making it black and white. But actually, I'm going to do it a different way as well, just to teach you some other information, and that is to make it what we call grayscale. So I'm going to switch this, or I'm going to undo this by going under Edit, Undo Black and White. The second way I'm really going to do it is under Image Mode, and I'm going to choose what's called grayscale right here. So in this case, whenever you're working in color inside of Photoshop, mostly you're working in red, green, and blue because each pixel has a version of red, a version of blue, and a version of green. But we can then go and tell Photoshop to convert each one of these pixels to gray. And that's what grayscale is. So instead of having any color information, it's going to convert it into gray. It's going to say, hey, you're going to lose all your color information. That's okay. We're going to say, yes, discard the color information. And you'll notice it does kind of the same effect that we did before. It makes it into a black and white image. And if we zoom in, you'll see that each pixel is a kind of a value of gray from white to black. There's 256 levels of gray. So each one of the pixels is 1 out of 256 levels of gray. That's what an 8-bit is inside of a grayscale image. And there. Let's see what other things I was going to talk about again inside this lesson. Grayscale. Oh, we're going to do some more color correcting. So this next one we're going to adjust skin tone. So we could save this flower if we want. Let's go and save it, and we'll talk a little bit about saving, and then we'll talk about skin tone for a moment. So let's get back to our Photoshop here. So we want to save this image. So again, it's already in the JPEG format. If we go under File, Save As, or say, if we hit Save, it's going to override the original one. If we want to save it as something different, we go under File, Save As. In the Save As option, they've been trying to push their cloud computing, but I don't have an account, or I'm not using it yet, so I'm just going to put it on my computer. And I can put it in the same folder. Maybe I call it Flower1, and I'm going to put an underscore after that, and I'm going to call it Gray. So again, I can save it as a JPEG again in the same folder with just a different name. Notice down here where it says Format, it says JPEG. And if I hit Save right now, it's going to say, hey, how do you want to compress? A JPEG is a compressed file, which means the pixels have been altered to be less file size. And how it really works is by taking 8 pixels and kind of smooshes them together. That's why JPEGs sometimes look blocky. But let's not worry about that right now. Again, I'm just going to leave the default. Right now it's on 11. You could go up to 12. The less you compress, which is larger file, the better the quality. If I hit OK, now I have saved that file. Okay, next we're going to open up a file that has 2 pictures of people in it, 2 girls in there. And the picture is not too bad. It's called Girls JPEG, and if I open that up, you'll see you have 2 girls in there. Right now, these girls are they're okay, but we might want to warm them up a little bit. And the reason why I want to do that is because I wanted to show you a tool called or the color correction feature called Vibrance. So to do this, it's under Image, Adjustment, and it's called Vibrance right here. Vibrance. So this one's kind of like the hue and saturation, where you can adjust the amount of color, but the difference between the hue, the vibrance, and the saturation is the vibrance will increase the amount of color, but not blow it out, and it's good for skin tone. So if I turn this up a little bit, you can see the skin tones start to get a little bit warmer, and all the colors get warmer, but it's not overly doing it. And what I mean by that is, if I'm going to exaggerate this all the way up to like 90 plus 94, and you can see it. But if you do the saturation, you'll see how the color gets really color, way too much color. So the whole purpose of me showing you this one is that skin tones can get a little bit more color in them by using the vibrance option. So if you're using people and you want to add a little bit more color to them, I would use the vibrance option and hit OK. And then this image again has some hot spots and some dark areas. I probably use the shadow and highlights for this one as well. And I might turn the shadow down. I don't want to bring out too much, and turn the highlights up just a little bit. Bring some detail back in their foreheads. And if you see before and after, you'll see it brings out a little bit more detail in their faces. And there's adjustment for color as well in there for that. And you just need to try this tools and see what they look like. And so that gets a little bit more detail in there. So again, you have some nice images. And for this example, it was the Vibrance was the main tool for that example. Again, for skin tone. The next one we're going to use, let me get back to my, here we go. I don't know why I keep closing this. And the next one we're going to get to, and this will be the last one, will be what we call an adjustment layer. And so I'm going to open up there's some jars in there, or they're olive jars. And the photo was taken at the wrong temperature, and I haven't really talked about temperature or anything like that yet. But let's open it up. So again, if you want to close any of these images, there's a little X up here at the name of the file at the very top. And if you click on it, it'll ask you to close. I'm not going to save that, and I'm not going to save that, not going to save that, not going to save that. So let's open up that. So I'm going to go under File, Open. And let's open up the one that says white pottery. White pottery. And again, it's in the lesson 1 folder. If I open that up, you'll notice this is a common problem that happens to me when I'm taking photos, is that the camera was not exposing properly, as well as the wrong temperature. What do I mean by temperature is that, color has a range of Kelvin, and we'll learn this in another lesson. But in this case, if I zoom in on these pictures, again, Command plus is zoom in, you'll see that these should be white and not necessarily it has a little bit too warmth. The term is warmth in this case. So we're going to do this a little bit differently. This time we're going to learn about something called the layer adjustment layer. So the same thing that we have over here, we go image adjustment, and we can do our levels and blah 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 over here, and color balance. We're going to use photo filter for color balancing. Instead of doing it over here, we do it in something called the adjustment layer. And what the adjustment layer is in a part called the layers window. So where is the layers window? Well, the layers window is under window layers, and you'll see it is open over here. And I know we haven't talked about any of these pop-up menus yet, but again, it's under window layers. And if I put my cursor all the way over here, and if you don't see layers, it should be over here somewhere, popped up here somewhere. There should be some layers over here. If you look over here, you'll see it says layers. If you don't see it, go under window layers. It should pop up in one of these tabs over here. To drag it out, I want to drag it so that the window is kind of over top here, so I can do some adjustments with it. You click and put your cursor over the word called layers right there, and I'm going to hold my left mouse down and I'm going to drag it out. When I drag out the word layers, once it's out, I can do things with it. I can make it bigger by putting my cursor along the bottom and putting. Do you see how the cursor turns 2 arrows that point in both directions? So I can click on it and make it bigger. I can move it around. How I move a window around is by clicking in the very top up here and dragging the window around. I can close a window by clicking on the X. As you can see, whenever you open an image up, it automatically has one layer that's called the background layer that's kind of locked right here. That's okay, we can leave it locked right now because I'm not really going to change this, but a lot of times I'll change the background layer to a normal layer by double clicking on it just so that I could do something with it. In this case right now, all I want to do is something called an adjustment layer. To do adjustment layer, if you look in the layers window at the very bottom, towards the bottom, there's some little icons down here. And the one looks like a half a moon right here. It's called the adjustment layer. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to hold my mouse down, the left mouse down. And again, these are kind of like all the same adjustments that you saw over there in the image adjustment. And the one I'm going to use again is the one we all know and love very well, is the levels. And if I choose levels, it's going to pop up with what? Oh, there's nothing there. Well, there is something there. Instead of having a pop-up window with the, how to do the levels, it has a properties window over here, as well as a layer that's above, okay? And you can see the layer here. If I go and I put my cursor around the properties, I can drag that one out as well by holding my left mouse down and dragging that out. And once I drag that out, I can then go the same options that I saw before, where I have the white, middle gray, and black. But this time, instead of actually dragging these triangles around, I'm going to do something, and that is to actually use these eyedroppers right here. What are these eyedroppers right here? Well, these eyedroppers are used to say, hey, where is the white? This one is white, the bottom one. Where's the middle gray? Where's the black? So watch, if I choose the white one right here, I'm going to click on this eyedropper, and I'm going to come over and say, okay, I want this highlight that's along the edge of these olive, whatever they are, olive things. If I click on it, it's going to adjust it, and you don't really see too much going on. Oh, there we go. If we exaggerate it a little bit, there we go. You see, that's much better. What it has done is not only adjusted the levels or the brightness of the image, but it also did some color correcting, so they're a little bit whiter. And so again, it's called levels. You can just click around and you can see the light changing. And I'm kind of going to go with oh, that's too much. I'm trying to get kind of that's a little bit better. Oh, that's a little bit too much. Way too much there. Way too much. And you can keep adjusting until you find out that's better. So again, this is a tool that you could use to adjust. Again, it's called levels. And to see a before and after, there is an eyeball in the properties window towards the bottom that you can see before and after. And there's an eyeball over here as well in the layers window that you can turn the eyeball on and off to see a before and after. And why did we use this adjustment layer instead of the other one? Well, you can use it because you can add more to it, and it doesn't alter the original pixels. By using the image over here, this image adjustment, it's altering the original pixels, where if you're using the adjustment layer over here, you're actually adjusting options that are above the original pixels. That's why you see it go back to the original when you hit the eyeball here. And they kind of call this non-destructive so that you don't alter the original photo and so on. I tend not to use adjustment layers myself. I tend to use this one just because I work very fast, and using this is much easier for me. But if you're new to Photoshop, using this is you might want to do this so that you don't ruin your original image, I guess is what the non-destructive is the term they use to describe it. So in addition, one more thing I'm going to do with this is to make it even a little bit more less warm. It's some of the things are not quite as nice as I would like them to be. I might make the blacks a little bit blacker. There we go. I'm going to adjust that. Again, in the properties under the here, you see your histogram, and you have your white, middle gray, and black right here. So I'm going to move that a little bit. And then the last one I'm going to do is under the half moon again. I might use one called the photo filter. I use this one a lot. It's called the photo filter. It is used to add either warmth or cool to an image. In this case, I'm going to actually add a cooling filter. There's a pull-down menu for the filter option. Warmth, it will, if something's too blue or too cool, you can add a warm to it. Or if something's too warm, you want to add it cool. I use the cooling filter 80 on this one. That makes it look much whiter. And then there is a slider for that to do less intense. So again, it's called the photo filter. How it works is there is a filter or color filter here. And there's a whole bunch of them, and you can learn about them and try some of them. A lot of it comes from photography. We used to use filters inside the enlarger. And I had a whole series of photo filters, and I would use them to adjust my images as well. But now we do it digitally here. And so I choose the cooling 80, and then I turned it down a little bit. But if I turn the eyeball on and off for the photo filter, you'll see it really gets rid of there's like this yellowish hue to this. And by turning it off, it makes it it should be white. These are white porcelain, and it's only a subtle, but it really makes a big difference, and you can see it if you just try it. So try those and save those, and that's pretty much the extent of my lesson 1 in color correcting.